Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here, and in today's video we have my Game Week 18 team selection where it'll be mainly focused on Saka replacements. Now it is quite a conundrum trying to decide who to bring in for Saka, so hopefully talking through my thought process here in today's first section of the video will help you guys to kind of break it down and also come to your own conclusions as well. And then we'll take a look at my Game Week 18 team and break down how my squad looks at the moment. So if you guys do enjoy today's video, please do drop a like. Please do subscribe as well, and let's get on with the video. So in terms of Saka replacements, I have my top 5, which I've listed here in Bruno, Son, Odegaard, Diaz, and Foden, but I've also kind of noted down just beside their names some of the pros and cons with regards to each of these picks. And then at the bottom here, just beside me, I have a couple of other options that maybe aren't as high up my own rankings in terms of Saka replacements, but it's worth considering as well. So I'll start off with Bruno Fernandes here. Now, he is obviously a very good ex-Mins player. Basically, he is very likely to start every single game, so you won't be worried in terms of starts. In terms of minutes as well, he does usually get a very good chunk of minutes. Maybe recently he doesn't get the full 90 minutes, or he maybe gets subbed off maybe 10 to 5 minutes early, but aside from that, you get a good majority of games and minutes from him. Moving forward, the fixtures are, I won't say the best as well. It is a bit of a mixed bag, but you know, with Bruno Fernandes, he's a very stable, good pick. He's on penalties. But Manchester United right now are also coming off a 3-0 loss to Bournemouth, right? So I don't really feel comfortable if I have to double up on Manchester United, and that is mainly the conundrum that I'm facing right now, where I have Ahmad already. I brought Ahmad in Game Week 17, and now that I have Ahmad, who is very cheap, do I move for Bruno Fernandes as my Saka replacement, pay about 8 million-ish for Bruno Fernandes to get good minutes and penalties, but then I double up on the Manchester United attack? So I'm not super keen on Bruno Fernandes, I'll be honest here, simply because I don't think it's that worth it to double up on the Manchester United attack. But for those of you who don't already have someone like an Ahmad, then I do think like it is relevant to give good consideration to Bruno Fernandes because of how secure he is as a pick. He is the safe one to go for. And I guess in terms of, while we're speaking about safe and, you know, maybe a little bit more risky picks, I really just want to call out the fact that going for your Saka replacement here is going to kind of allow you to differentiate a little bit, because now, as we've just spoken about in terms of Saka replacements, there's not going to be many straightforward options. Each of them have their pros and cons. And I think this will be a point in time where you can start to deviate from the template. So Bruno, as I said, is the safe option. If you are a manager that wants to differentiate and you don't want to go for the safe option, there are other players out there. So I'll speak about Son next. So Son is quite expensive. He's around 10 million as well, very close to the price point of Saka. And because he's so expensive, he will block me from future moves. Now, this is obviously relevant to my own team because of my own plans, but I would advise for you guys who are looking at Son as your replacement as well to think about whether going for Son will block your future moves. So for myself, I am intending to sell João Pedro soon enough because the fixtures will also start to turn for Brighton. And the plan is actually to sell him to either one of Jesus or Mateta. Now, Jesus, as of recording, is at about 6.8. Mateta is at about 7.2. So not too much of a difference there. But they are going to cost quite a bit more if I do an upgrade from João Pedro upwards, because João Pedro is only at about 5 million. So I will need money in the bank for this move. And if I do Saka to Son now, then eventually when come the time that I want to sell João Pedro for either one of Jesus or Mateta, I will not have enough money. So I think mainly it comes down to how much I prioritize having Jesus/Mateta in place of João Pedro, and I think it's more important for me to get either one of these players in place of João Pedro than it is to kind of go for Son in this place. So I think for now, because of that, I think I'm going to lean away from Son. Also because the fixtures moving forward aren't also the best for Tottenham, in that now they have Nottingham Forest. Moving forward, there are some fixtures that you would imagine Spurs would do well as well, but there are a couple of difficult ones in there. So it's a mixed bag for Son. And I'm not convinced that at the price point that we're going to pay for him, that the upside is worth it with him. So next up, I have Odegaard here. Now, Odegaard is obviously sticking with an Arsenal player. If I do move for Odegaard, I will continue to get the good fixtures that I think Arsenal have moving forward. It will start to get a little bit tricky after the Ipswich game, but I think still you would back the Arsenal attack to do well. My only concern with Odegaard is even while Saka was in the team and they were gelling really well, Odegaard wasn't necessarily putting out very good data. In fact, it was quite bad. When you compare it to last season's data as well, Odegaard is faring quite far off in terms of the kind of XG and XA that he's putting up. So I do think I don't mind the Arsenal fixtures, and because of that, I will speak about players like Trossard and Martinelli, again, who are on this list beside me. But just specifically on Odegaard, his data is really not good. So from that perspective, I'm not super keen. But then there's the other side as well, where he's now going to be on penalties because Saka is out now. So you would assume that Odegaard takes up the kind of first choice penalty taker duties, and then in terms of set pieces as well, you saw Saka take a huge chunk of them. The guess now is that Odegaard is going to be the one who is taking those set pieces because he is also able to kind of take those in-swinging crosses. So I do think Odegaard will get more share of set pieces, and then he'll also be on penalties. Is that enough to justify or to kind of cover up the poor data that he has and then, cause us to go for him as a Saka replacement? Now, another thing that I want to speak about also is that I do think there will be some changes in terms of Arsenal's style of play moving forward. Because of the fact that Saka is so integral to the Arsenal team, they have obviously adapted a certain style of play. But now that Saka is out, you would assume, or what we just saw over the weekend, was that Martinelli moved to the right and Trossard came on and played from the left. So how that would impact the dynamics between how Declan Rice operates and also Odegaard operates would maybe change the outlook for Odegaard. So there's a bit of uncertainty there. And I think you just have to factor this in if you do go for Odegaard as your Saka replacement. Now, next up, there's Luis Diaz here. Now, he is coming off a 13-point haul in Game Week 17. So this pick could feel a bit knee-jerky. I do admit that. But when I look at the fixtures moving forward for Liverpool, it's pretty good. And you don't need me to tell you that Liverpool are one of the best attacking sides in the league this season. They're scoring so many goals at this point that maybe it is worth it to go for Luis Diaz despite him being the biggest X-Mins risk in this list. Now, basically, when I compare all of these picks, Bruno, Son, Odegaard, Diaz, Foden, Diaz is the one that I'm the least confident of starting every single game for the next 5 to 6 game weeks, considering now is the festive period and there may be rotation because players like Jota and Darwin Núñez, they're all available on the bench and could very well fill in against weak opposition. And those are the fixtures that Liverpool will be having for the next few. So could Luis Diaz be rotated? I think it's possible. In general, when you're going for FPL picks, you would tend to go for the safer option, or at least someone with decent enough X-Mins. And simply because of how dangerous it is, I feel like Luis Diaz is going to be a very risky pick. It's not my style to go for someone like Luis Diaz, but I'm going to be honest here and say that in terms of all these 5 picks, I think Luis Diaz is in the top 2 for me, and I might go there, take the risk, play him for every single game week for the next 5 to 6, and hope that if he does miss out, that the points that he will score on the game weeks aside from the game week that he misses out is going to cover up for it. So I'm going to play the long game if I do go with Luis Diaz here, bearing in mind as well that in game week 24 there will be a double game week there's very likely going to be a double game week for Liverpool. And maybe in that game week, if I do have Luis Diaz, he could be a bit of a differential. So those are things going on in my mind with regards to Luis Diaz as a pick. But I fully appreciate that he is a very risky pick and he's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. All right, so last on the list, I have Phil Foden here. Now, Phil Foden just scored his first goal of the season against Aston Villa. It was a 2-1 loss, but I think he played pretty decently. I mean, considering the fact that City were not having control of the game, for the chances that kind of Foden got, I think it's good enough in that particular game. Aston Villa played very well. Now, moving forward, City have the best fixtures for the next 5 game weeks. After that, it does get tricky. So I could look to move Phil Foden on after that. So Phil Foden, going for him here as my Saka replacement is definitely going to lock me into a transfer later down the line to take him out of my team. But the fixtures here, as I've mentioned for City, are the best. And in terms of opposition moving forward that could potentially mount somewhat of a performance like Aston Villa and also Brighton did against City, I actually don't think that there's going to be many teams in their run coming up that's going to be able to do that. So let me just pull up the fixture ticker for Man City, and you'll kind of understand what I mean by kind of the fixtures not being as difficult as they were previously, where we saw a couple of upsides of Man City. So the City fixtures for the next 5 reads Everton at home. Now I know Everton are a very decent defensive side, so maybe it's a bit tricky for Man City to get something considering they're not in good form right now, but that is at home. So that's the Game Week 18 game. And then there's Leicester away in Game Week 19 who are conceding loads of goals. So you would expect that Leicester away is a decent enough fixture for Foden. And do you expect Leicester to be able to mount somewhat of a performance like what Aston Villa and Brighton did against Man City? I would tend not to think that way, and I would think that City still win that. And then there's West Ham, and that would be at home as well. So West Ham, also a team that I don't think is going to be able to mount somewhat of an upset against City. And then there's Brentford, who's conceding so many goals, and Man City will be playing them in Game Week 21. And then there's Ipswich away in Game Week 22, and Ipswich just conceded 4 to Newcastle. So I look at these teams that I've just listed: Everton, Leicester, West Ham, Brentford, and Ipswich. There's really only actually one fixture that I think maybe we could see an upset there, and that's Brentford away in Game Week 21. Now, this could be famous last words. City could go on to lose more than what we expect, but I think there is a decent enough chance to bet on the fact that they will pick up form against these slightly weaker opposition. And because of that, going for Foden here could be going early on a potential City comeback, right? So for sure, we will be gambling on the fact that City turn their form around, but I think there is decent enough consideration to be given to Phil Foden. And minutes-wise, I think he looks pretty good for minutes. He did miss out a couple of games where he didn't even feature in the earlier part of December, but that was simply because he was ill. So he missed the Nottingham Forest game early on and also the game just after that 2 days later. But aside from those games, he is pretty good for minutes. So I actually think that when I compare Foden to Diaz, I'm more confident of Foden getting more minutes than Diaz over the next 5 to 6. So in terms of these top 5 Saka replacements, if I am to rank them, right, Bruno, Son, Odegaard, Diaz, and Foden, in the top 2 would be Diaz and Foden. Now, it's simply because I'm considering my own situation. As I've said just now, Bruno Fernandes, he's a stable and safe pick, but I already have Ahmad. I don't really want to double up on United. Son, I don't want to block my future moves later down the line. Odegaard, his data is pretty bad despite him now being on more set pieces as well as penalties. So when I consider all these factors, I would actually put Diaz and Foden top 2 for myself. And thereafter, in terms of the bottom 3, in order, it would be Bruno, followed by Odegaard, and then Son. So in terms of who I'm most likely to go for as my Saka replacement, it would either be Foden or Diaz. I'm kind of leaning towards Foden a little bit now, and I completely understand if some of you guys disagree with this pick and you think like going for City assets right now could be absolutely crazy. And if that is the case, you could very well consider other options. And I will speak about them right beside me here. So there's Trossard and Martinelli that I have not spoken about yet. There's also Maddison from Spurs. There's Gordon from Newcastle, and also Ismail Assar from Crystal Palace. So sticking with the Arsenal picks first in Trossard and Martinelli, now that Saka is missing out, you would expect that the expected minutes for Trossard and Martinelli will go up pretty high. And it's likely going to be the case because there's not a lot of replacements, as well as the fact that Sterling just got injured. It's going to be missing for a while. Arsenal don't have a lot of first-team wingers right now. So it's going to be Trossard and Martinelli for the next few, I do imagine. Maybe you see Jesus move to the left now and then. But honestly, it's looking good for these attackers here. So minutes won't be a concern. But I do think like when I look at Trossard and Martinelli as picks, yes, they're very cheap and they will still allow you to attack the Arsenal fixtures. but they really don't come across to me as players that are going to get mega hauls over the next few game weeks, and it's simply because the Arsenal attack is so diverse and all of them are so capable of scoring goals in their own right. You would expect Jesus to come up with a couple of goals over the next few game weeks, Havertz as well, and then Trossard, Martinelli capable of getting goals themselves, and then Odegaard as well. So you add everyone into the mix, it's pretty much the goals are going to be spread among all these players. And I compare this to, players like Foden, like Diaz, like Son, like Bruno. I do feel like they are more likely to be their goal scorers for their respective teams. And I just don't get that sense or as strong of a sensing from Trossard and Martinelli. So I do think like the minutes will be good. And if you feel like the safety in minutes as well as the Arsenal fixtures are enough for you to want to move for them, fair enough. But I would still rank them lower than these 5 picks that I've picked out here above me. Right, so next up, there's Maddison. Now, Maddison is a pick that I feel has gone very much under the radar. Whether it's tough opposition or whether it's easy opposition, Maddison has been ticking along. And I do think like a lot of people have kind of moved off him earlier on in the season because there was a point in time where he was being rotated with Pep Matissa. But right now we are also seeing Ange Postecoglou adopt a couple of different formations where both of them can be on the pitch at the same time. But that again still doesn't mean that Maddison is guaranteed to start every single game for the next few. So I think that is the main risk with him. If not, for the price point that he's at, about 7.6 million, and playing for a team that is so attacking minded, I honestly don't mind if some of you guys decide that you want to go for James Maddison. He's a very under the radar pick and a typical kind of differential that would really set you apart because the upside is definitely there with James Maddison. As we've seen against Man City, he scored 2 goals. Against Liverpool, he scored a goal. And he's just a very integral part of the Spurs attack, and the quality that he possesses, we just know it. Right, so that's with James Maddison. Now, next up, it's Anthony Gordon. Now, with Anthony Gordon, the fact is that I already have Isak, and I would imagine that many of you guys are prioritizing Isak first in terms of Newcastle attackers. But then when I look at the fixture run that they have coming up, it is actually not as easy as it would appear to the eye. And because of that, I think you look at the pick like Isak, you don't mind playing him through those slightly trickier fixtures. But then I don't think their fixtures moving forward shout out to me as fixtures that I want to be doubled up in Newcastle attack, regardless of how well they've been doing over the last few game weeks. So because of that, I've also placed Gordon further down this list, only in this kind of other options section here. And really, I would rank him kind of lower than players like Maddison or Trossard and Martinelli. And lastly, there's Ismail Assar. So Ismail Assar was actually higher up my list. But I do think like because moving forward, the Crystal Palace fixtures, I do agree, are really good. Bournemouth now in game week 18 may not be easy, but after that in game week 19, they have Southampton. They have Chelsea in game week 20, but after the Chelsea game, it gets good for a very long period of time. Sa is definitely someone I did consider, but I would actually say that I prioritize getting someone like Jean-Philippe Mateta in place of João Pedro later on. And it's mainly due to the fact that Mateta is not only the point man for Crystal Palace, but also a player that is on penalties for Crystal Palace. We saw him take penalties ahead of Eze, even though Eze was on the pitch. So I do think like Crystal Palace will get goals over the next few game weeks, and I think that I want to have that penalty taker as well, and I'm likely not going to want to be doubled up on Crystal Palace. So if it's a choice between choosing one attacker for Crystal Palace, either Mateta or Sa, I'd actually prioritize, as I've said, Mateta, and that is the reason why I've dropped Sa further down this list into the other options region. So with all these players discussed, again, the decision that I have right now in front of me is going to boil down to either one of Foden or Diaz, and for the time being, you may not agree with me, I completely appreciate that, but I think I'm leaning towards Foden over Diaz because he is the one that has a little bit safer of a minutes projection over the next few game weeks and also having the best fixtures. So I'm going to be probably gambling on City turning their form around. We'll see what happens, and I obviously reserve the right to change my mind on the deadline stream. I will be potentially making my transfer on the deadline stream, so again, it will be on Boxing Day. Hopefully you guys are around for the deadline stream to catch it. It'll be 3 hours before the deadline. If not, this kind of wraps up my kind of analysis on the Saka replacements that I have here. Hopefully it was useful for you guys. And let's now take a look at my team for game week 18. So for game week 18, this is how my team is looking like at the moment. Again, just to refresh your memory, I have already locked in one free transfer to bring Isak in for Cunha. So I don't have any transfers left. So selling Saka, as I've spoken about in the starting part of today's video, is going to be for a hit. Now, again, the most likely player that I'm going to bring in for Saka is either one of Foden or Luis Diaz. And then aside from that position, it's going to pretty much be status quo. So just to kind of walk you through my current team, for Bruggen here in goal is going to be ahead of Flecken because he has the home fixture. But again, I'm really not expecting much from him. Now, there's Saliba and Gabriel both playing Ipswich at home. I would expect clean sheets for them in that game, and hopefully, with the way that Ipswich are defending right now, maybe some set-piece goals for both of these players. And then there's Rico Lewis here. Now, he's in the team simply because Robinson has Chelsea away. I am hoping that City do a job against Everton, even though I don't think it's going to be likely because Everton have been defending very well against Arsenal and Chelsea, keeping them to a 0-0 draw in both of those games. So I don't expect City to score a lot, and maybe moving for Foden here is not going to see returns immediately. But I think after that, as I've mentioned, the fixtures are pretty good for Man City. So Rico Lewis is going to fill in here, but after this game week, I'm going to be playing Robinson instead of Rico Lewis. Foden, if I do bring him in for Saka, would obviously still be in the squad. Right, and then in midfield, it's Ahmad, Salah, and Palmer. Aside from this Saka replacement that I will make that transfer soon. So for Ahmad, I think quite disappointing that against Bournemouth, coming off a win against Man City previously, that they immediately lose 3-0 at home to Bournemouth. It's not ideal, but I still like the numbers that Ahmad is putting up, and for the price point that he's at, as I've mentioned, even bringing him in that game week, that I don't expect him to return every single game. I'm going to be happy enough to have him in my squad, even if he returns once every 2 to 3 games. So Ahmad is here. Rodgers is on the bench against Newcastle away. I would just favor the Wolves away fixture slightly, and that's why Ahmad is here. For Salah and Palmer, they're going nowhere. Both home fixtures for them. I will discuss captaincy in the next section. And then there's Isak, Jackson, and João Pedro. Now, not too much to speak about in terms of Isak and Jackson. It's simply the João Pedro pick here that I said. I'm starting to lose a bit of patience with João Pedro, and I've already penciled in a move for game week 19, as we spoke about in the previous section, that I intend to sell João Pedro to someone like a Mateta in game week 19, or it could even be Jesus. It really depends on what we see over the next couple of games, but it is a move, or it is a position that could very well change, and João Pedro could be on the chopping block, right? So, but he will stay for game week 18 simply because I'm not going to take a hit to remove him before he plays Brentford at home. Aside from João Pedro, the rest of my squad looks like this. Rodgers first on the bench, Chelsea away from Robinson, who's second on the bench, and then Greaves is just a bench for the spot. So there we go for the Game Week 18 team. Again, largely going to be centered around who I replace Saka with. But let's now have a look and wrap up this video with the captaincy algorithm. So looking at the captaincy algorithm, even before we look at game week 18, I'm going to review game week 17 very quickly to be transparent with you guys. So for game week 17, the captaincy algorithm picked Palmer as the captain of choice, followed by Salah. It was a very marginal difference between Palmer and Salah, but at the end of the day, we have to review the model for what it is, and it picked Palmer. So that is obviously considered as a failure because Salah went on a 21-point haul. So that was a miserable failure for the captaincy algorithm. And in terms of success rate now, it's 12 out of 17 game weeks. So we're going to need to see a little bit more from the model. Hopefully moving forward, it's going to pick up more successes. But 12 out of 17, I think it's all right for now. We need to see it improve a little bit. So for game week 18, what we have in front of us now is the algorithm points for Salah, Palmer, and Haaland, who are the top 3 this week. Now, again, for those of you who are new to the algorithm, it is basically a weighted average value of the predicted points from 3 different sources, and we give different weights to the different sources based on reliability. So Salah this week is the standout captain, and I don't think you even need the algorithm to tell you that he is, because the matchup already tells us enough. It's at Anfield and it's against Leicester, who just conceded, I think, 6 goals in the last 2 games. So I do think it's straightforward enough this week, and you look at the point difference between Palmer and Salah, it is huge. It is 1.5 algorithm points. So Salah definitely going to be my captain for game week 18. Not even a discussion here. So we're going to leave it at that for the game week 18 captaincy algorithm, and that's it for today's video. So if you did enjoy today's video and you found some use in it, please do drop a like. Please do subscribe as well. Let me know in the comments below if you're replacing Saka, who is your Saka replacement and why. And also, now that we're here in the Christmas season, I wish all of you guys a very Merry Christmas. Hope that you guys have a great time with your friends and families. And we'll see you guys on the Game Week 18 deadline stream on Boxing Day, as always, 3 hours before the deadline. Bye-bye.